we're here. So I thought Cynthia, you could tell us about what your role is at the city to start, and then I'm just curious to sort of set the stage, because I think it's important to think about why we do the things we do and what the sort of reasons are, and getting out of the, well, here's my role, right? And I'm sure you sort of have a story about why you do the work that you do and why you think it's important in general.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So my name is Cynthia Graham. I am a professional landscape architect registered to practice in Ontario. I am the manager of landscape architectural services for the City of Hamilton. That falls within the Environmental Services Division in Public Works. We manage all of the large capital improvements in parks and open spaces. So that includes new park creation, but it also includes redevelopments. So parks that are aging, or the demographics around the area are changing and the needs are changing. My group would go in and do the master plans all the way through to the implementation of the construction and oversee the construction process. We're also involved with planning, and often are the leads on parkland acquisition projects. So before it even becomes land that's owned by the city, we get involved in that. And we help review development applications for subdivisions and site plans, so that we are advocating for parkland and open spaces across the city in that respect. I guess one of the things that my group feels really passionate about, and I do personally, is that we create spaces that make people's lives better, that we are responsive to the needs of the residents and the users in Hamilton, and create beautiful, safe and well-loved spaces that really improve quality of life, improve health outcomes, allow for people to experience the outdoors and enjoy their time in our spaces. And that's a really important function of city building. So is that what you, is that what you want to know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's wonderful, right? Like, there's so many. I think it's really interesting with your role with within the different planning components, and how that it links into so many other outcomes that the city is working towards, that are maybe secondary or tertiary from designing a park, right? But it's for population health and for mental well-being, and all these determinants that we know are really linked to green space and to activity and supporting those different roles. So I think it's a fascinating role you have in general of those different pieces. Yeah, so I'm curious then, from there, if you can, I think that sets the stage really well for what the challenge is, and I think everyone's probably had a chance to read the challenge. But if you could sort of walk us through, particularly from the city side, around like what, where you see the challenges occurring, and how you've framed your particular challenge through CityLAB here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So there's a couple things I've learned over the years of working at the city and in doing this role, that I think people intuitively understand the value of parkland and trails and open spaces. But when it comes to empirical evidence and research related to the value that people assign to it, or how it affects their lives, or the place that it holds within their well-being, I think that is often a gap in research. And so when it comes for me to try and advocate for funding or lands to be allocated or changes in legislation at the provincial level, the difficulty comes in not being able to point to the research that supports that. So I actually have had a couple projects over the years that really haven't gone anywhere, because I wasn't able to say, putting this trail through here is going to benefit you, and it's not going to degrade the landscape around you. And I can point to research that shows that. So when I was speaking with my director about a couple things, one is we know that downtown Hamilton is going through an intensification process, and there's more and more condo towers, more and more people actually living downtown. Yet there's no more parkland being allocated downtown. The last of our urban parks is John Rebecca, and we built it last year. That's it for the city, unless we can somehow, acquire new lands to create new parks. So that's one thing. The second thing is there's going to be budget crunches in the next several years related to allocation of funding for projects. And I wanted to frame the value of parkland and the importance of parkland in people's health and well-being and creation of cities. And where I was looking for evidence and research to support that, expending funds in this manner is in the city's best interest and will benefit the residents in this way. And then lastly, at the provincial level, there's been some legislative changes with respect to parkland acquisition. So Bill 108 came through, is the Better Homes, Better, More Choices Act, I think is what it's called. And it actually changes the formula to be able for cities to be able to acquire parkland or take cash in lieu of parkland. And so the actual amount of parkland and the money we would be receiving from developers in order to acquire and build that parkland is going to be reduced in the future. So it's even more important for us to be able to say that we need to be advocating for open spaces and trails and recreation and outdoor spaces for people, especially because the new condo developments don't have backyards. The public space is the only recreation outdoor living areas that these people are likely going to have. So I was in a conversation with my director about that, and I said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a research project that looks at, now that we are isolating in our homes, we're reducing our interactions with people, we're not going on vacations. How has that changed the perspective of people and the value that they associate with their local open spaces and green spaces? And use that as, in this post-pandemic environment, has there been a change? First of all, are people assigning more value? And then I was involved in several working groups with that Code Red project over the years. And one of the things we did find in all of those working groups with the neighborhood strategies was the value that people assigned to parkland and open spaces and the health outcomes that were associated with areas that had low parkland and open space availability for those residents. So is there a relationship? Are people in areas that have smaller backyards, less access to parks, less access to trails, are there more incidences of negative health outcomes because of isolation, because of physical distancing and all of the new realities that we're experiencing? I just felt like this is an opportunity, and probably a once in, well, I don't know how often a pandemic happens, but it's been a while, and I'm hoping it's not going to happen regularly, but there's a window in time here. Yeah, there's a window in time here when we can get some really interesting data to support why parks and open spaces and trails and are so important for people, and really can create livable cities and places that people want to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see, so you mentioned seeing this as an opportunity. Can you expand on that in terms of what you think might be possible for an envisioned future?
Well, I don't think that cities are going to necessarily suburbia with people with backyards, but what we are seeing is that parkland is so valued, particularly in dense urban spaces like, you know, downtown Toronto. I know the parks and the trails in those spaces are really have a lot of pressure on them to be the backyard for those people. But it's very, very difficult for city staff to acquire lands in those urban dense areas because the land values are so high. So in order to assign other value to it, other than just the value that that land could be in homes and property taxes and all of the other things that come along with having people in those spaces, making sure that we're advocating for the other functions that need to happen. So what I see is the change is that people will start to recognize the value of urban parkland and trails and connectivity and all of those different things. And I'm hoping that it will evolve the conversation so that we're not looking at parkland as the leftover spaces. We're looking at parkland as the keystone of neighborhood development.
Right. So trying to help with that, you're looking for support in making that argument more clear.
That's right.
To bring those benefits that we and that you know as a landscape architect to be true, but sometimes struggle to put the pieces together around making a convincing sort of evidence-based, timely.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess to that point, I mean, I'm a believer in pure research, so I didn't want to presuppose what the answers would be, but I was interested in understanding if there was a change in perception, if there was more value placed on those, if there are links between mental and physical health with access to recreation and open space, that's exacerbated by this pandemic condition. So I think that it was just a thought that I feel like intuitively that would be the case. I don't know if it is, and I would be interested to find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing how that sort of functions within the community and how it breaks down in different surprising ways that we may not have thought of, right? And that's the point of that research, I guess. Yeah. Can you so we'll give an opportunity soon to the other staff and faculty members, but I'm curious, before we get into their sort of questions and maybe opportunities for them to ask and tell us more about their interests, could you sort of tell us what you envision from some ideas you've had around student involvement and sort of expand on, I think you ticked off the primary research category in your challenge, if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I could see this, you know, actually being a pretty good fit for remote work because I feel like a lot of this doesn't need to be people physically out in places, you know, being exposed to other people like some other primary research might have to be. I think that I checked off primary research because I envision this as data collection and analysis. So it could be, you know, observing people's use in parks, which could be, you know, a primary set of research. You know, how are they traveling in large groups? Are they small groups? How many are there? Do you see repeats? It could be a survey that is sent out to a group of residents who are across the city, and they fill out a survey online, and that's analyzed with some demographic information. It could be more of a geographic GIS analysis of, along with some health indicators. So if there was data that was coming from hospitals about, you know, these people got sick in this way, they are living in this location, the adjacency of parkland and trails is this in their area, and that kind of analysis from that perspective. So I see a whole range of possibilities, and really I would be interested in any kind of slant that anybody can come up with in order to fit the needs of your students, but support also the thought that, you know, what has this change meant for people and how they're living their lives.